What is up, internet? Okay, so got a form review here for a gentleman by the name of Elliot who posted his throw on the Disc Golf Form Check Facebook page. So I'm gonna do a little review for him, and I'm like context here. I'm gonna try to spin this one a little bit and talk about mechanically what is happening in a kind of a different framework. Reasoning because long story. The reason I started this channel is because I was trying to help people on disc golf form check, and I realized, okay, everyone has the same or very similar mechanical problems. I don't want to type out a 250 word response 5 times in a row, because I sat down one night and that's what happened. I said, "Hey, look, your X step's too big. You're turning this foot around. You're turning this foot around. You're falling forward over your brace." I was like, "Okay, there's patterns here, so I can identify patterns, coach on patterns, and then just plug people's throws into the pattern and say, here, you go watch this video." Is a more efficient way to try to help people. Mixed success. It's really hard to coach online because you lose the individual touch, and unless you're coaching to one individual, which is what I'm doing here, but you're always trying to apply those principles to more common movement patterns, so they affect, so that the coaching can help more than just one person. I feel like I haven't really cracked that as much as I want to. Part of that is I'm small. This is my little tiny corner of the internet with only 3K subs, and not everyone sees my stuff. That's fine. I understand that. But despite my efforts over the past 2 years, I've seen, you continue to see new players making the same mechanical mistakes. So the knowledge of how to fix that isn't getting transmitted through the internet yet. Couple of reasons. It's just really hard to learn from a video and actually learn how to apply that to your throw. That's part of it. Another part of it is this sport is really hard. And like I've said this before, but we evolved to throw heavy things. Our brain knows how to do that. You have to get your mass in motion and rotating, and then you can kind of do it. This follows a different set of rules. So we don't need that turning backwards, leaning over to falling forward thing. You want more of a framework which allows your hips to torque quackly. Torque your hips quackly. You heard it here first. But you want to turn momentum into hip torque. That's what I coach. That's what all of the top players do, regardless of style. Yes, that is true. I'm thinking about the edge cases. So that's what we need. It's not quite happening yet. So I'm going to keep bashing my head against that particular brick wall forever. That is my fate. So, couple of things you can do if you like my style of coaching in order of coolness, according to me. Number one, you can sign up on the Patreon at the top tier. It's a $175 tier. What you're paying for at that tier is 4 form reviews a month. So that's a full 20-minute review and a 10-minute check-in. So basically, that's my whatever you want tier. We can spend a bunch of time every week going over your form. So if you like the one gentleman who's on that tier right now is on vacation essentially, and he says, "Okay, I want to grind it out for a month," and we're doing some great work. So what I'm doing to promote that tier is, if you sign up at that tier, I will add for free, no cost to you, a 20-minute video call that can be whatever you want it to be. It can be an individual lesson, which would probably be most beneficial after your first review, but it can also just be a let me get to know your throw and what you want out of disc golf, so that I can coach more specifically to what you want. So free 20 minutes of my time if you sign up at that tier, because I like working with folks at that tier. It's fun. Second thing you do is sign up on the Patreon at all. There are 2 lesser tiers, which get you 2 or 1 full review a month. Go check those out if you're at all interested. If you like my stuff, you would like my individualized coaching too. Third thing you can do, this is the lower cost, no cost option. I am committed to doing a certain number of free form reviews on the Disc Golf Form Check Facebook page. So there is a post, there's 2 posts on there of me saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I'll do another one just for visibility relatively soon. But go find one of those posts, post your videos on a comment there, and I will either do it this week or get you on a wait list to do it later. I'm just going to do one of those per person, and then after that, maybe folks will migrate onto the Patreon. Maybe they'll have what they need and they can just take that and run with it. But I'm just trying to get some more visibility on the Patreon there. Okay, so let's take a look at Elliot's throw. Now that housekeeping is out of the way, thank you for your patience. Okay. So what he said is looking for advice, currently at 325 max and trying to get the 350 plus. Any advice is appreciated. Okay. So I'll just play it once before I clicky pause it to death. So that's a pretty chill 325. That was probably more of a placement shot than a max power thing, guessing. Boom. So, like, there's nothing glaringly wrong here, but we see a lot of pretty common things. So, I could go through this exactly how I normally do, but that's kind of the point of this video is I've done that a million times. So, either people aren't listening, which is fine, or it's not effective at transmitting understanding, so that's why I'm going to try something a little different. First, I need my draw tool. This happens off camera. You can't see it. Now it's here. Okay, so the first idea that I'm going to talk about is we have a point of ground contact, we have a center of gravity, and we have the computer, which just happens to be in a line with the other 2 things. So what I'm looking at is this line from head to ground contact. That line is not vertical. We want closer to vertical because the line being tilted forward, can't draw. The program that does this that everyone uses called Epic Pen does not run on Linux, so you get to look at my little 5-year-old child lines instead. Apologies. But this line here requires some tipping forward to get to balance. So this force necessarily has to be slowing the center of gravity down. I'm not sure that's actually scientifically true, but like the way I think about stuff, which does help you understand, I believe that makes sense. Like, think about it. If our friend here was riding a unicycle and the seat's right here, like this unicycle is slowing down because it's leaning backwards. If we alternately have the seat of the unicycle going forwards, in order to not fall, this unicycle has to be speeding up. So that's just the level I'm thinking on here. It may not be scientifically accurate, but I believe it is useful for the purposes of illustration. So we don't want this because that turns this ground contact into an anchor. That is a poorly drawn anchor. I am a 5-year-old with a mouse. So that's the first idea. We don't want to do that. So in the past, I would get nitpicky about, okay, well, your X step is too long. Okay, your foot is turned back too much, which it's not turned back too much, but like that's kind of the nuance of this cue. Is if we think about, okay, the goal is don't anchor on your X step. Then if I go like this and my foot ends up on a 45, that's okay because I didn't anchor. If I go like this, I'm anchored. Oh, no, I'm anchored. I'm so anchored. Also falling over. So I have this spine lean and I have this knee bend, which in order to get off of that foot, I'm going to have to do this, which puts this out of position because I anchored. So just don't anchor. Like we can worry about angles, and like I like this with that toe still pointing at the camera because I feel like it just sets you up for success in terms of being able to coil into that. I don't even want to say that word, but here we are. Because then you can get off of it and have it going in the right direction already. So just think about just don't anchor. The best example of this that I'm aware of, I don't watch a lot of pros throw. I probably should. But Anthony Barella is dude's got fast feet. Like he can be flying down the tee pad and his X step floats. He's not going, boom, I'm on my X. Okay, now I'm going to throw. He moves like, boom. He's floating and skipping past that X step, and there's never any weight or intent or anchor on that step, full stop. There just isn't. That really sets us up for success a lot more because in order to put my weight on it, one, I'm usually going to be leaning backwards, which means I'm going to be tipping forward to throw, which is slow and inefficient. It might feel powerful, but that's not what we want. We don't want to feel power. We want to feel speed through structure. So it's a paradigm shift that is counterintuitive. I think that's why so many beginners get trapped in the same movement patterns that tend to cap out around 300 feet, which is where we're at with Elliot. So don't anchor. Float over that. When you float over, you will stay in better posture. When you do a one leg drill, if you stay in balance, you will stay in better posture. There's no reason here to lean over and crank your throw over, and you're gonna know that's not effective. If you learn how to throw decently from one leg, you will fix your posture. So that's the first idea. Don't anchor your X step. Second one is do not balance on your plant step. So just like we don't want to get established here in terms of staying there, we want to be passing that foot. We also don't want to get balanced on that front foot. So here, there's a better frame. This is balance on that front foot. Trying to think if there's a better way to explain that. So like there is really balanced. Like yes, there's dynamic motion, but this is not what we want. So again, timing becomes super relevant because like eventually that is what you want. But in the dynamic portion of the throw, we actually don't want balance. We want to be out of balance. So what we need to happen is we need the hips to stop in this position. So the center of gravity is essentially going to stay there. This foot is going to stay there. This leg is going to be doing some extension, but it's going to stay there. So when the leg extends, this hip moves up and back. This hip is allowed to move down and forward. So everything's rotating on a tilted plane. We're maintaining a hyzer there. This leg is going to go into counterbalance, so it's actually going to move backwards. So there's a lot of things going on. This hip is going to move back. This hip is going to move forward. This leg is going to move back. This leg is going to stay there and extend. So this is all in the crumple zone video and the what to do with your lower body 1, 2, 3, 4 thing video. But I'm planting here. The foot is going to stay there. The leg is going to stay there. The leg is going to extend. This hip is going to move away from the camera and up. This hip is going to move towards the camera and down. This leg is going to move backwards. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to switch to 1, 3, 2, 4. That's what we want. We want that, and that can't be in balance. So if you get onto the front leg and get here, you're balanced. We need the throw to happen before that. So you're here in an A-frame stance with some offset. So this is offset. My right foot is out of frame. My left foot is in frame. This is no offset. I'm square. Here doesn't work because when I get to that, my hips just stop. When I get an offset and I shift my weight behind my front heel and then try to stop, all of a sudden then I get hip torque. That's what we're trying to create. So my weight shift needs to go not at my front foot, and it needs to go not on top of my front foot where I'm ending up in balance. My weight needs to go behind my front foot while I stop the front hip. Then this will stop and clear. This will be allowed to rotate, and this can move into a counterweight roll to keep me on my hyzer lean. If I don't have the rear leg in a counterweight roll, I lose my spine tilt because as a rule, your rear leg always dictates where your spine ends up. So if I start here, my rear leg stays there, my spine will stay in line with my leg. If I take too long of a next step, get anchored, my anchor is still there, my spine is going to end up lined up with my rear leg. So you need your rear leg where we want it to be to make your spine be where we want it to be. So that's all. Don't get balanced on your front foot. So we need to be stopping in this A-frame before we get balanced on the front foot. The throw happens, boom, here, out of balance. I'm not balanced. I can only do this because I'm holding onto a bar and torquing it. That got conflated with this. Happened in baseball, happened to us too. So that this is an artifact of trying to do the demo right statically when you can't. Because it has to be done, boom, in dynamic balance. This has to de-weight for the back leg to be able to move right. If you have some weight there and you're just moving the leg, you can approximate the motion, and that's enough to get you to feel it right, and that's why it works sometimes to some extent. But it's not the finished move, and that's not how you want to think about it. You don't want to think about actively driving this into internal rotation as a primary source of power. The rotation can be active. That will add power because it'll free up your rear hip. But I don't like to think about that as a primary thing that's happening. If you're throwing like Gannon, maybe that is a primary thing. Gets complicated very quickly. Second point, don't get balanced on your front foot. And another thing I really wanted to point out here is Elliot is not 20 years old. I am not 20 years old. Not all of us are blessed with the athletic ability to be able to move like Drew Gibson. That's fine. We shouldn't even strive for that, but we can look at that type of movement as an ideal to move towards as much as we can, given our physical capacity. So I'm coaching a lot of these ideas in like pretty extreme situations, but you don't have to get all the way there. It's a spectrum from the dude who's 70 years old and his spine is relatively fused and he does what he has to do to make it work. And his form is never going to be a mechanical ideal, but we can optimize things inside of that. The other end of the spectrum is Drew Gibson. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. So you can put these principles into effect as much as you are able to with your body. It's not a, all or nothing kind of thing. So a lot of times I am going to coach to a relatively extreme example. And then what's realistically going to happen is you're going to find some percentage of that motion that works for you. And you're going to get some percentage of that front leg containment, for example. But you're not going to look like Drew Gibson. That's fine. I'm just explaining the peak so that you can get closer to it. And anything is good there. So second point is don't get balanced on the front foot. You want to throw out of balance where you are dynamically balanced. You have momentum going in. You're going to stop that momentum. That momentum gives you a moment of suspension where you can keep this A-frame situation going on and have this rear leg airborne while the hips are crumpling into the front hip. Okay, so that's the second point. And those two are both about weight. The third one is don't get the elbow lower than the swing plane. And I'll link to Neil's video. Neil is Stepwise Disc Golf. Me and him had a chat recently. He is really super onto something with controlling elbow orientation during the throw. So I'll get into that a little bit later and link to his video. Got to check in with him on which one he wants me to link to though. So do not get the elbow lower than the swing plane. And this is something that Elliot does accidentally. He does a decent job recovering from it. But note the elbow is lower than the swing plane. We also have an issue that we're ending up with a pretty neutral spine here. We're not really on hyzer because the legs are in an A-frame. The front leg is getting too short, but the spine is relatively upright, and that's a function of the rear leg position. So the spine will end up here in line with the rear leg, and we actually want the rear leg to be here, back further, that way, so that the spine can pitch front towards us more, and maybe the hips away from us a little bit more, so that this stagger is more, like the foot would be that way, essentially. So, like, that's a lot. So, but again, that's this the thing of we don't want to be shifting at the front foot. We want to be more stagger, shifting the weight behind the heel. Then the rear leg can drift here, and we can maintain a hyzer lean because this is going to be our finish position with our spine in line with our rear leg. If the rear leg ends up here, the spine is going to end up here, and we're just shifting at our front foot. So we want this so that we can have this stop, this go, and the rear leg stay in a counterweight to keep us on the hyzer. Lots of stuff there. There's a lot more on the channel. Ask questions if it's not clear. But we're on number 3. Number 3 is the elbow is definitely lower than the shoulders. And because the spine is upright, that gets harder. So if the spine isn't upright, so I need to be here, essentially. I need to have my elbow on the same plane my shoulders are going to rotate on. There's some nuance here, but at a basics level, that's what you want. You don't want this, because then your axis of rotation becomes this bone, and you have a super weak lever. Here I have this lever and this hinge, so it just tends to work better. So we can't get here. We cannot have the elbow lower than the shoulder plane. So this elbow orientation doesn't work because I can't use this hinge to help me throw a disc that way. I need the hinge this way so that I can throw. Excuse me, I can't talk. So the thing that Neil came up with is, and I am guilty of this, I said, okay, well, let's simplify the swing plane so that people stop screwing it up. Mixed results at best. So what I said was, okay, shoulder plane. We're just going to be on the shoulder plane. We're going to be here. We're going to reach back. Throw. Flight plate on shoulder plane. 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 Most people can't do that. I can do that. I have pretty good shoulder mobility. And pretty good body awareness of stuff like that. So I can say, okay, I just want to stay here, reach back, stay here, throw. That works for me. Most people tend to want to go, okay, I can set up here. Okay, now I have to throw. Rules are different. I'm going to do this. because I'm going to overactivate my lat, and I need my elbow close to me to keep it safe. It's dangerous and scary out here. Do not go alone. That's what our brain says. So most people don't actually, I think, have a mobility issue. They're perfectly capable of staying up here biomechanically, but their brain says, oh, I need to use power to throw, and that works like this. I use my lat to pull my elbow down. And then, crap, this isn't going to work. So then I need to do something to fix it. Cool. Now it works with 10 degrees and nose up. Doesn't work. So my fix, which works for me, is just have awareness, have good shoulder mobility, stay up here. Doesn't work for most people. So what Neil figured out was, okay, we don't need to crank into internal rotation here and let people suitcase. So suitcasing, briefcasing, according to everyone else in the world, helps keep the elbow up. So if I invert the disc, it's going to make my elbow go up. If I do the opposite and I go to a ton of hyzer, it's going to make me go to this elbow bend, which is external shoulder rotation. So internal shoulder rotation, external shoulder rotation. So the previous thought was just stay in internal. But then, oh wait, we actually have to go to a little bit of external so we don't pop our elbow on the way out. So, okay, then it's internal, external. But people can't stay internal to internal. They go internal, external. You can see why I avoided the complexity of this. So just keep it here. That's a lot easier to convey to people. But Neil said, just lean into the complexity. Like, we have to understand the complexity. We have to figure out the complexity in order to actually be able to do it. So what Neil figured out was, if you start neutral, come into briefcase in the center chest position, and then roll out from there, this to that is good because you're rolling towards nose down. So you have a chance of actually getting to nose down. If you throw in its nose up, you didn't roll enough. If you throw in its two nose down, you rolled too much. So you can adjust the timing and the rate of your roll, how much intention you have of turning the wrist over, to get it dialed in. Very challenging, but doable. Here, it's not doable. You have to add some cue that is arbitrary, or change your grip into some weird nonsense that this has actually worked for some people. But the idea that Neil found out that freaking works is going from a neutral position, or an externally rotated position even, to aggressive internal rotation at center chest. That helps keep the elbow up. So you have rotational momentum going into your pocket position, if we're using that phrase. Boom. So it's actually external to internal to external, if you want to make it as simple as possible. So that's what I would suggest for you, Elliot. Try that out, because this isn't going to work. You can't get power into your throw there, because you've said, okay, I this is all leverage I need. I don't need this much leverage. I can get by with a third of that. And that's going to limit your power, full stop. Okay. Had one more half point. Nope. Just signal boost Neil stuff. Okay, so I'll put a link to Neil's best video, according to him, for this concept in the gobbledygook below. Realize that was a little bit of a slapdash review for you, Elliot. So if you have any questions on any of that, let me know, and I will fill in any gaps. But it's just, again, trying a different approach of getting people to think about this stuff in a way that actually creates more change in the average beginner. Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Internet. Go check out the Patreon if you are at all interested. And we'll see you next time. Later.